The old piano sat in the corner of the living room like a forgotten friend. Its wooden surface was covered with a thin layer of dust, and family photos lined the top. 7-year-old Jake had walked past it hundreds of times without giving it much thought. But on this particular rainy Tuesday afternoon, something changed. School had ended early because of a water pipe problem, and Jake found himself home alone with his 4-year-old brother Tommy, while their mom worked in the kitchen. The house felt unusually quiet except for the gentle patter of rain against the windows. Jake was bored with his video games and tired of his toys. That's when his eyes landed on the piano. He approached it slowly, almost like it might bite him. The bench creaked as he sat down and lifted the heavy wooden cover that protected the keys. Underneath, black and white keys stretched across like a giant smile. Jake pressed one key gently. A clear, beautiful sound filled the room. Tommy, who had been playing with his toy cars on the carpet, immediately looked up. His big brown eyes grew wide with curiosity. He abandoned his cars and toddled over to his big brother. "What's that?" Tommy asked, pointing at the piano with his chubby finger. "It's Grandma's old piano," Jake replied, pressing another key. This one made a different sound, lower and deeper. Their grandmother had lived with them until she passed away 2 years ago. She used to sit at this very piano every Sunday morning, playing songs that made the whole house feel warm and happy. But after she was gone, nobody touched it anymore. It just sat there, collecting dust and memories. Jake started pressing keys randomly, creating a jumbled mess of sounds. Some were high and tinkly, others were low and rumbling. Tommy giggled at the funny noises, clapping his hands together. "Can I try?" Tommy asked, reaching his small hands toward the keys. Jake scooted over on the bench, making room for his little brother. Tommy had to stand on his tiptoes to reach the keys properly. When he pressed one, his whole face lit up with joy. "It's magic," Tommy declared, pressing another key. Their mother, Lisa, heard the piano sounds from the kitchen and smiled to herself. She hadn't heard music from that piano in so long. She wiped her hands on her apron and peeked around the corner to watch her boys discover something special. Over the next few days, Jake found himself drawn to the piano more and more. He would sit there after school, experimenting with different combinations of keys. He discovered that when he pressed certain keys, together they sounded beautiful. When he pressed others, they sounded terrible. He started to understand that there was a pattern to it all. Tommy became Jake's constant companion at the piano. The little boy would drag his small plastic chair over and sit beside the bench, watching everything his big brother did. Sometimes, he would reach over and press a key, adding his own musical contribution to whatever Jake was playing. One evening, their father David came home from work to find both boys at the piano. Jake was slowly picking out a simple melody he had figured out, while Tommy hummed along in his sweet, innocent voice. "That sounds really good, boys," David said, loosening his tie as he walked over to them. "Dad, listen to this," Jake exclaimed, playing the little melody again. It wasn't perfect, but it was recognizable as an actual song. David sat down on the couch behind them, amazed at what he was hearing. Jake had somehow taught himself to play a simple version of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," just by experimenting with the keys. "How did you learn that?" David asked. "I just kept trying different keys until it sounded right," Jake explained. "And Tommy helps me. He tells me when something sounds good or bad." Tommy nodded seriously, as if he was indeed a professional music critic. Lisa joined them in the living room, carrying a cup of tea. She sat next to her husband and watched their sons make music together. There was something magical about seeing Jake's determination and Tommy's pure joy as they explored the piano together. "Maybe we should get them some lessons," Lisa whispered to David. "Let's see how serious they are about it first," David replied quietly. "But I have to admit they seem to have a natural talent for this." As the weeks passed, the piano became the center of the boys' world. Every day after school, Jake would rush to the piano bench. Tommy would follow close behind, ready to be his brother's audience and assistant. Jake started figuring out more songs, simple children's melodies that he remembered from when he was Tommy's age. The most amazing thing was how the brothers worked together. Jake had patience with Tommy that he never showed with anything else. When Tommy wanted to try playing a melody, Jake would guide his little fingers to the right keys. When Jake got frustrated because he couldn't figure out a tricky part, Tommy would pat his shoulder and say, "It's okay, Jake, try again." Their mother started finding piano method books at the library. She would leave them on top of the piano, and Jake would study them like they contained the secrets of the universe. He learned about things called chords and scales. He discovered that there were rules to music, but also that sometimes breaking the rules could create something beautiful. Tommy, meanwhile, developed an incredible ear for music. Even though he was only 4 years old, he could tell when Jake played a wrong note. He would scrunch up his face and say, "That doesn't sound happy," or "That one sounds sad." Jake learned to trust his little brother's musical instincts. The piano bench became their special place. It was where they sat together every evening, creating sounds that filled their house with joy. Their parents would often pause their own activities just to listen to what the boys were working on. One evening, as autumn leaves began falling outside their window, Jake discovered something wonderful. He was playing around with different chord combinations when he stumbled upon a sequence that sounded incredibly beautiful and peaceful. Tommy was humming along, as he always did, when suddenly the melody he was humming perfectly matched the chords Jake was playing. "Tommy, do that again," Jake said excitedly. Tommy hummed the same melody and Jake played the same chords. It was like they were having a musical conversation. Jake's fingers danced across the lower keys while Tommy's voice floated above like a gentle breeze. "We sound like real musicians," Tommy said with wonder in his voice. "We are real musicians," Jake replied, and he meant it. Their parents heard this magical moment from the kitchen. Lisa reached over and squeezed David's hand, both of them recognizing that something special was happening in their living room. Their boys weren't just playing around anymore. They were making real music together. That night, as Lisa tucked Tommy into bed, he said, "Mommy, I love making music with Jake." "I can tell, sweetheart," Lisa replied, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Do you think Grandma can hear us when we play her piano?" Tommy asked. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I think she can, Tommy. And I think she's very proud of both of you." As she turned off Tommy's light and closed his door, Lisa could hear Jake still at the piano, quietly practicing. The house felt alive with music again, just like it had when Grandma was there. But this time, it was her own children filling the air with melodies and dreams. Winter had settled over their small town, and the evenings grew longer and colder. The boys' daily piano sessions had become as regular as dinner time. Jake had progressed from simple children's songs to attempting more challenging melodies, while Tommy's humming had grown more confident and melodic. It was a Friday night in December when everything changed. The family had decided to have a movie night complete with popcorn and hot chocolate. Lisa had picked out an old family film from her childhood, something she thought the boys would enjoy. David dimmed the lights, and they all snuggled together, on the couch under warm blankets. The movie was enjoyable enough, but as the credits began to roll, something magical happened. Soft, gentle music started playing in the background. It was a song none of them had really paid attention to before, but tonight it seemed to fill the entire room with warmth and hope. The melody was simple, but incredibly beautiful. It spoke of trees and skies, of wonderful things in the world around us. Tommy sat up straighter on the couch, his eyes wide with attention. Jake leaned forward, listening intently to every note. "What song is that?" Jake asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Lisa smiled. "It's called What a Wonderful World. It's a very old song that many people love." "It sounds so peaceful," Tommy added, still listening as the credits continued to roll. David reached for the remote, but Jake quickly said, "Dad, can we hear it again?" They rewound the credits and listened to the song once more. This time, Jake was studying the melody like he was solving a puzzle. His fingers moved slightly on the blanket, as if he was already trying to figure out how to play it on the piano. When the song ended, Tommy immediately started humming the main melody. He had only heard it twice, but somehow he had memorized it perfectly. His sweet, innocent voice carried the tune beautifully. "Tommy, that's exactly right," Lisa exclaimed, amazed at her 4-year-old's musical memory. "Can we learn to play it on the piano?" Jake asked, his eyes bright with excitement. I don't see why not, David replied. You boys have been doing amazing with all the other songs you've learned. That night, Jake could barely sleep. The melody kept playing in his head, over and over. He found himself humming it softly into his pillow, already imagining how it might sound on the piano. The next morning, both boys rushed to the piano before they even ate breakfast. Jake sat down at the bench and slowly began trying to pick out the melody. It was more complex than the simple children's songs he had mastered, but he was determined to figure it out. Tommy stood beside him, occasionally humming parts of the song to help Jake remember how it should sound. When Jake hit a wrong note, Tommy would gently say, "That's not quite right," and hum the correct part again. "This is harder than I thought," Jake admitted after about an hour of trying. "Don't give up," Tommy encouraged him. "Remember what Mom always says? Practice makes perfect." Lisa watched from the kitchen doorway, marveling at how supportive the brothers were of each other. She had worried that Tommy might feel left out since Jake was the one actually playing the piano, but instead, Tommy had become Jake's most dedicated helper and cheerleader. Over the next several days, Jake worked on the song bit by bit. He would figure out a small section, practice it until he could play it smoothly, then move on to the next part. Tommy remained his constant companion, humming along and offering encouragement. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening. Jake had been struggling with a particularly tricky part of the melody when Tommy suddenly said, "Jake, what if you play the low notes and I sing the high parts?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked, looking at his little brother. "Like this," Tommy said, and he began to hum the melody while pointing to different keys on the piano. "You play these deeper sounds, and I'll do the singing part." Jake's eyes lit up with understanding. Instead of trying to play the entire melody himself, he could play the supporting music while Tommy handled the main tune with his voice. They tried this new approach, and something beautiful happened. Jake's fingers found chords that perfectly supported Tommy's singing. It was like they were having a musical conversation, with Jake providing the foundation and Tommy soaring above it with the melody. "This sounds incredible," Jake exclaimed. After they played through a section successfully, Tommy beamed with pride. Even though he was only 4 years old, he had solved a musical problem that had been frustrating his older brother for days. Their parents heard this new version from the next room and quietly came to listen. What they witnessed took their breath away. Jake was playing chord progressions that seemed advanced for his age, while Tommy's pure, sweet voice carried the melody with perfect pitch and timing. "How did you boys figure that out?" David asked, when they finished. "Tommy had the idea," Jake said, giving his little brother full credit. "He's really smart about music." Tommy blushed but looked incredibly proud of himself. From that day forward, their version of the song began to take shape. Jake spent hours working on the chord progressions, listening to his library books about piano playing and experimenting with different combinations of notes. He discovered that some chords sounded sad, others sounded happy, and some sounded mysterious or hopeful. Tommy, meanwhile, practiced his singing every day. He would sing the song while playing with his toys, while taking a bath, and sometimes even in his sleep. His voice grew stronger and more confident with each passing day. The most amazing part was how they learned to play together. Jake would start with the opening chords, setting the mood and tempo. Tommy would come in with the melody, his voice blending perfectly with the piano. They developed their own timing and rhythm, different from the original recording but uniquely theirs. Lisa started recording their practice sessions on her phone. She wanted to capture these precious moments of her boys discovering music together. When she played the recordings back, she was amazed at how much they improved each day. One evening, as snow fell gently outside their window, the boys performed their version of the song for their parents. It wasn't perfect. Jake occasionally stumbled on a chord change and Tommy sometimes forgot a word, but it was filled with such joy and innocence that Lisa found herself wiping away tears. "That was absolutely beautiful," she said when they finished. "Do you really think so?" Jake asked, always seeking his parents' approval. "I think it's the most beautiful version of that song I've ever heard," David replied honestly. Tommy climbed down from his chair and hugged both his parents. "Music makes me happy," he said simply. It makes all of us happy, Lisa replied, hugging him back. As winter turned toward spring, the song became their signature piece. They played it every evening, each time discovering something new about the music or about playing together. Jake learned that music wasn't just about playing the right notes, it was about feeling and emotion. Tommy learned that his voice could create something beautiful when combined with his brother's piano playing. Their bond as brothers grew stronger through their shared love of music. The piano bench became their special place, where age didn't matter and they were equal partners in creating something wonderful. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were preparing for something much bigger than their living room performances. Their dedication, their teamwork, and their pure love of music were building toward a moment that would change their lives forever. Spring had arrived with its promise of new beginnings, and the boys' musical journey was about to take an unexpected turn. Jake and Tommy had spent months perfecting their version of the song, playing it for anyone who would listen. Their grandparents, neighbors, and family friends had all been treated to private concerts in their living room. It was a sunny April morning when Lisa picked up the local newspaper from their front porch. She was sipping her coffee and flipping through the pages when a colorful advertisement caught her eye. The headline read, "Annual Spring Talent Showcase. Open to all ages." The community center was hosting their yearly event, inviting local residents to share their talents with the neighborhood. Lisa read through the details twice, her mind racing with possibilities. The showcase was scheduled for the first Saturday in May, just 3 weeks away. "David, come look at this," she called to her husband, who was making breakfast in the kitchen. David walked over, still holding a spatula. He read over her shoulder and his eyebrows raised with interest. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" he asked. "I don't know," Lisa replied, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Do you think they're ready for something like this?" Just then, Jake and Tommy came running down the stairs, their pajamas wrinkled from sleep and their hair sticking up in all directions. "Ready for what?" Jake asked, always curious about adult conversations. Lisa hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to pressure the boys, but she also didn't want to hide opportunities from them. "Well, there's going to be a talent show at the community center," she explained carefully. "People can sign up to perform music or dance or whatever they're good at." Tommy's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Can we do our song?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Lisa said gently. There would be lots of people watching, maybe 100 or more. Jake's face showed a mix of excitement and nervousness. 100 people? That's a lot. "It is a lot," David agreed, sitting down at the table with them. "But you boys have been working so hard on your music, and you're really, really good." "What do you think, Jake?" Tommy asked his big brother. Even at 4 years old, Tommy looked up to Jake for guidance on big decisions. Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking it over. He had never performed in front of strangers before. The biggest audience they'd ever had was when both sets of grandparents visited at the same time. That was only 6 people, and they were all family. "Would we play our special song?" Jake asked. "If you wanted to, yes," Lisa replied, "but only if you both feel comfortable with the idea." Tommy bounced up and down in his chair. "I want to. I want to share our music with everyone." Jake looked at his little brother's enthusiasm and felt some of his nervousness fade away. Tommy's confidence was contagious. "Okay," Jake said slowly, "but we need to practice extra hard. We can't make any mistakes in front of all those people." "We won't make mistakes," Tommy declared with the absolute certainty that only a 4-year-old could possess. Lisa and David exchanged glances. They were both proud of their boy's courage, but also worried about setting them up for disappointment or embarrassment. "Let's think about it for a few days," Lisa suggested. "If you boys really want to do this, we'll need to register by next Friday." Over the next few days, the house buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Jake threw himself into practicing with an intensity that surprised his parents. He played their song over and over, working on every chord change and making sure his timing was perfect. Tommy, meanwhile, practiced his singing constantly. He sang in the shower while brushing his teeth and even while playing with his toys. His voice grew stronger and more confident with each repetition. But as the days passed, Jake's nervousness began to show. He started making mistakes during practice, mistakes he never made before. His hands would shake slightly when he thought about all those people watching him. "What if I forget how to play?" he confided to his mother one evening after a particularly frustrating practice session. Lisa sat beside him on the piano bench. "Jake, honey, you've played this song hundreds of times. Your fingers know exactly what to do. But what if they don't? What if I mess up and everyone laughs at us?" Tommy overheard this conversation from the doorway. He walked over and climbed up on the bench next to Jake. "Jake, remember when I was scared to go down the big slide at the playground?" Tommy asked. "Yeah," Jake replied. "And you told me that being scared was okay. But I shouldn't let it stop me. From doing fun things?" Jake nodded, remembering the conversation. "Well, playing music is fun," Tommy continued with 4-year-old logic. "And we're really good at it. So we shouldn't let being scared stop us." Lisa marveled at Tommy's wisdom. Sometimes the youngest member of the family had the clearest perspective. "You're right, Tommy," Jake said, taking a deep breath. "We are good at this." "We're more than good," Tommy insisted. "We're awesome." That night, Lisa and David had a long conversation about whether to encourage the boys to perform or protect them from potential embarrassment. "They're so young," Lisa worried. "What if something goes wrong?" "But what if something goes right?" David countered. "Look how much they've grown through music already. This could be an amazing experience for them. Or it could be traumatizing." "Lisa, they're not performing at Carnegie Hall. It's the community center. These are our neighbors and friends. Everyone will be rooting for them." The next morning, Jake made the decision for everyone. He walked into the kitchen where his parents were having coffee and announced, "Mom, Dad, we want to do the talent show." "Are you sure?" Lisa asked. "I'm sure," Jake replied with newfound determination. "Tommy's right. We're good at this and it's fun. I don't want to let being scared stop us from sharing our music." Tommy appeared behind Jake, nodding enthusiastically. "We're ready." Lisa looked at her boys, 7 and 4 years old, standing together with such courage and determination, and felt her heart swell with pride. "Okay then," she said. "Let's go register." The drive to the community center felt like an adventure. The boys chattered excitedly in the back seat, making plans for their performance. Tommy wanted to wear his best shirt, the blue one with the buttons. Jake thought they should practice walking onto the stage so they wouldn't trip. At the community center, Mrs. Johnson, the event coordinator, was delighted to register such young performers. "How wonderful," she exclaimed. "We love having children participate. What will you be performing?" "We're going to play piano and sing," Jake explained. "It's a very beautiful song," Tommy added helpfully. Mrs. Johnson smiled warmly. "I'm sure it will be lovely. You'll be performing on Saturday, May 4th at 7 p.m. The show starts at 6:30, so you should arrive by 6 p.m. for setup." As they walked back to the car, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and terror. In just 2.5 weeks, he and Tommy would be on stage in front of their entire community. "Are you nervous?" Tommy asked his big brother. "A little," Jake admitted. "Are you?" "Nope," Tommy replied cheerfully. "I'm excited. We're going to make everyone happy with our music." Jake smiled at his little brother's confidence. Maybe Tommy was right. Maybe this would be wonderful. That evening, their practice session felt different. They weren't just playing for themselves or their parents anymore. They were preparing to share something special with their whole community. As the sweet melody filled their living room once again, both boys felt a sense of purpose they had never experienced before. They were going to take their music beyond the safety of their home and share it with the world. The talent show was still weeks away, but their real journey was just beginning. The big day had finally arrived. Saturday, May 4th dawned bright and clear, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring flowers through the neighborhood. But inside the house, Jake woke up with butterflies dancing in his stomach. He had barely slept the night before, his mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. What if he forgot the opening chords? What if his hands shook too much to play properly? What if Tommy got scared and ran off the stage? Meanwhile, Tommy bounced out of bed like it was Christmas morning. He had been talking about the talent show for weeks, telling everyone at preschool that he and his big brother were going to be famous musicians for one night. Jake. Jake. It's today, Tommy called out, running into his brother's room and jumping on the bed. I know, Jake mumbled, pulling his pillow over his head. I'm nervous. Don't be nervous, Tommy said, patting Jake's shoulder through the pillow. We practiced 1,000,000 times. We know our song perfectly. Lisa appeared in the doorway with a gentle smile. How are my two performers doing this morning? I'm great, Tommy announced. Jake's worried, but I told him not to be. Lisa sat on the edge of Jake's bed. It's okay to be nervous, sweetheart. Even professional musicians get nervous before they perform. Really? Jake asked, peeking out from under his pillow. Really? Being nervous means you care about doing well. That's a good thing. Throughout the morning, the house was filled with a mix of excitement and tension. David made everyone's favorite breakfast, pancakes with maple syrup, hoping to calm the nerves. Tommy ate with his usual enthusiasm, but Jake could only manage a few bites. I keep thinking about all those people watching us, Jake said, pushing his pancakes around his plate. Jake, remember when we went to Tommy's preschool program? Lisa asked. You were so proud watching him sing with his class. Yeah, he was really good, Jake replied. And everyone in the audience was smiling and clapping, right? They weren't judging or looking for mistakes. They were just happy to see children sharing something beautiful. That's exactly what tonight will be like, David added. Everyone will be rooting for you boys. As the day progressed, Jake gradually began to feel better. They spent the afternoon doing normal Saturday activities, playing in the backyard, watching cartoons, and having a light lunch. But as evening approached, the nervous energy returned. At 5 o'clock, Lisa announced it was time to get ready. Tommy had insisted on wearing his best outfit, a crisp white shirt with a red bow tie that made him look like a tiny gentleman. Jake chose his navy blue button-down shirt and his nicest pants. Look at my handsome boys, Lisa said, helping Tommy adjust his bow tie. You both look like real performers. Do we look professional? Jake asked, checking himself in the mirror. You look perfect, David assured him. But remember, it's not about how you look. It's about the music you're going to share. At 5:45, they loaded into the car. Jake carried a small bag with extra sheet music, even though he had memorized every note. Tommy clutched his favorite stuffed bear for comfort, though he planned to leave it with his parents before going on stage. The drive to the community center felt both endless and too short. Jake stared out the window, watching familiar neighborhoods pass by. In just over an hour, he would be performing in front of more people than he had ever seen in one place. When they arrived at the community center, the parking lot was already filling up. Families were walking toward the building, some carrying flowers for their performers, others with cameras ready to capture the evening's memories. Inside, the community center had been transformed. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage decorated with colorful banners. The lighting was warm and inviting, nothing like the harsh, scary spotlights Jake had imagined. Mrs. Johnson spotted them immediately. There are our young musicians, she called out warmly. Are you ready for your big moment? We're ready, Tommy declared confidently. Jake nodded, though his voice seemed to have disappeared somewhere in his throat. Let me show you the piano, Mrs. Johnson said, leading them toward the stage. The piano was larger than the one at home, its black surface gleaming under the lights. Jake approached it cautiously and pressed one key. The sound was clear and beautiful, filling the room with a single, perfect note. It sounds good, he said, his voice returning slightly. Can I try? Tommy asked. He climbed onto the bench and played a few notes of their song. His small hands looked even tinier on the big piano, but the music sounded just as beautiful as it did at home. Perfect, Mrs. Johnson said. You boys are going to be wonderful. You're performing fifth in the lineup, so you'll have time to watch some other acts and get comfortable with the atmosphere. As 6:30 approached, the audience began taking their seats. Jake peeked out from backstage and saw the room filling with people. There were elderly couples, young families, teenagers, and children of all ages. His grandparents were in the third row, beaming with pride. Several neighbors had come to support them, The show began with a group of teenage dancers who performed a routine full of energy and spinning moves. The audience clapped enthusiastically, creating a warm, supportive atmosphere. Next came an elderly man who played classical pieces on a violin. His music was so beautiful that the entire room fell silent, listening to every note. A group of middle school students followed with a comedy skit that had everyone laughing. Then a young woman sang a popular song with her guitar. "We're next," Mrs. Johnson whispered to the boys. Jake's heart began pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. His hands felt cold and slightly shaky. Tommy looked up at his big brother and took his hand. "Jake, remember what Grandma used to say about her piano?" "What?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. "She said the piano was magic because it could make people happy. We're going to make everyone happy tonight." Jake squeezed Tommy's hand and took a deep breath. His little brother was right. This wasn't about being perfect or impressing anyone. It was about sharing the joy they had found in music. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Johnson announced to the audience, "please welcome Jake and Tommy performing What a Wonderful World." The audience applauded as the boys walked onto the stage hand in hand. Jake helped Tommy adjust the small cushion on the piano bench so he could reach the keys properly, then sat down beside him. Looking out at the audience, Jake saw friendly faces everywhere. People were smiling encouragingly, some giving them thumbs up. His grandparents looked like they might burst with pride. Jake placed his hands on the keys and looked at Tommy, who nodded with complete confidence. The room fell quiet with anticipation. This was it. Months of practice, weeks of preparation, and years of growing up together as brothers had led to this single moment. Jake pressed the opening chord and the most important performance of their young lives began. The first chord rang out clear and beautiful across the silent room. Jake's nervousness began to melt away as his fingers found their familiar positions on the keys. This was their song, the melody they had practiced together for months. The E. Piano felt like an old friend beneath his hands. Tommy waited for exactly the right moment, just like they had practiced. When Jake played the gentle introduction, Tommy's sweet voice joined in, carrying the opening words with perfect timing. His small voice filled the room with innocence and joy that only a 4-year-old could bring to music. In the audience, Lisa felt tears spring to her eyes immediately. There was something magical about hearing her boys perform their special song. For others, David reached over and squeezed her hand, both of them watching in amazement as their children transformed into real musicians before their eyes. The brothers fell into their natural rhythm. Jake's hands moved confidently across the keys, playing the gentle chords that supported Tommy's melody. Every note was exactly where it should be. All those hours of practice had paid off. Their fingers and voices knew exactly what to do. Tommy sang about trees of green and skies of blue, his voice growing stronger with each line. He wasn't just singing words, he was sharing a feeling, a sense of wonder about the beautiful world around them. His innocent perspective on the lyrics brought fresh meaning to the familiar song. The audience was completely captivated. What had started as polite attention quickly became genuine fascination. People leaned forward in their chairs, not wanting to miss a single note. The room was so quiet that every gentle piano chord and every sweet vocal note could be heard perfectly. Jake played a beautiful bridge section, his fingers dancing across the keys with more confidence than he had ever felt before. He could sense the audience listening, really listening, and instead of making him nervous, it made him want to play even better. This was what music was meant to be, something shared, something that brought people together. Tommy's voice soared through the chorus, and something incredible happened. Several people in the audience began to smile, really smile, the kind of deep, joyful smiles that come from the heart. The boys' pure, honest performance was touching something special in everyone who heard it. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady in the front row, wiped away a tear. The song reminded her of her late husband who used to hum it while working in their garden, but hearing it sung by these two young brothers gave it new life, new hope. Jake noticed that people weren't just listening politely anymore. They were truly moved by the music. He could see it in their faces, in the way they sat perfectly still, not wanting to break the spell that the boys had created. As they moved into the final verse, Tommy's confidence grew even more. He began to add small natural gestures with his free hand, expressing the joy he felt in the music. Jake matched his energy, playing with more warmth and feeling than ever before. The lyrics spoke of wonderful things in the world, and in that moment, with his little brother singing beside him and an audience full of caring people listening, Jake truly understood what the song meant. The world really was full of wonderful things, and music was one of the most wonderful of all. Their voices and piano blended together perfectly as they approached the ending. Jake played the final chords with gentle precision, while Tommy's voice carried the last notes with such sweetness that the entire room seemed to hold its breath. When the last note faded into silence, something beautiful happened. For just a moment, nobody moved. The audience sat in complete stillness, as if they were afraid to break the magic that the boys had created. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with Jake and Tommy's grandfather, who began clapping with tears of pride streaming down his face. The applause spread through the room like a wave, growing stronger and stronger until the entire audience was on their feet. The boys looked out at the standing ovation in amazement. People weren't just clapping politely, they were clapping with real enthusiasm, real emotion. Some people were wiping their eyes. Others were smiling so widely it looked like their faces might split. "We did it," Tommy whispered to Jake, his eyes shining with excitement. "We really did it," Jake whispered back, hardly believing what was happening. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Mrs. Johnson had to step onto the stage to thank the boys, but even then, the audience kept clapping. Finally, Jake and Tommy took hands and gave a small bow, just like they had practiced, which made the audience cheer even louder. As they walked off the stage, still holding hands, Jake felt like he was floating. All his worry and nervousness had been replaced by the most wonderful feeling he had ever experienced. They had shared their music with their community, and everyone had loved it. Backstage, their parents rushed to hug them. Lisa was crying happy tears, and David looked prouder than they had ever seen him. "That was absolutely incredible," Lisa said, kneeling down to hug both boys at once. "Did you hear everyone clapping?" Tommy asked excitedly. "They really liked our song." "They more than liked it, buddy," David replied. "They loved it. You boys were amazing up there." Throughout the rest of the evening, people kept approaching the family to compliment the boys' performance. Mrs. Chen from down the street said it was the most beautiful thing she had heard in years. Mr. Rodriguez, who owned the local grocery store, asked if the boys might consider performing at the store's anniversary celebration. Even other performers in the talent show came over to praise the brothers. The teenage dancers said they were inspired by how confidently the boys had performed. The violin player told them they had natural musical talent that was rare to see. As the talent show concluded and families began heading home, Jake and Tommy walked to their car with their heads held high. They had faced their fears, worked hard to prepare, and shared something beautiful with their community. In the car on the way home, Tommy fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by all the excitement. Jake stared out the window, replaying every moment of their performance in his mind. "How do you feel, Jake?" Lisa asked softly from the front seat. "Happy," Jake replied. "Really, really happy, and proud of Tommy. He was so brave up there." "We're proud of both of you," David said. "What you boys did tonight was very special." "Can we do it again sometime?" Jake asked. "If you want to, absolutely," Lisa replied with a smile. When they got home, Jake helped carry sleeping Tommy up to his bed. As he tucked his little brother under the covers, Tommy stirred slightly. "Jake?" Tommy mumbled sleepily. "That was the, best day ever." "Yeah, Tommy," Jake replied quietly. "It really was." Later that night, as Jake lay in his own bed, he thought about everything that had happened. 6 months ago, he was just a regular 7-year-old who occasionally poked at his grandmother's old piano. Tonight, he was a performer who had moved an entire audience with music. But more importantly, he and Tommy had discovered something amazing together. They had learned that music wasn't just about playing the right notes or singing the right words. It was about sharing feelings, bringing joy to others, and creating moments that people would remember forever. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake was already wondering what song they might learn next. After all, the world was full of wonderful music, and he and Tommy had only just begun to explore it together.